So we are here in Berlin, in Level Gallery. You are also known as a collector of, you just mentioned that mainly video works, but then I need to stop already because collecting video, I think it's even a smaller group in the collectors' world, because of course many people want to collect Picassos and all the great names, and the video was stay behind for a long time. But I think now this is so fresh that videos are getting mainstream. How do you see this evolution?
Well, I think the new digital reality that we find ourselves, it supports video art in a way. And the way that the video side of the collection has gone is commissioning videos to be made. Mostly now we're doing this digital fairy tale series. And then the artists also can get paid if we were to license. With the videos, it's also a desire to create a longer lasting ability for the objects to, have money or make money for the artists, and for that message to continue to grow. And even now Leo Kuelbs' collection probably has got about 120, 100 and something around there videos, and eventually, hopefully they'll be donated somewhere, and then the artists, still their rights will be, donated with that. A thing about content and then creating, copyright stuff and like this. There's some other opportunities with video art that there isn't with paintings or photos or things like sculptures.
For art lovers, video is so natural because it's not the normal video what you can see on the movies or on the TV, but an artist video is also a kind of intimate moment sometimes in many videos.
Yeah, and we're exploring now these intersections between experimental short film, narratives, video art, and even things created more for a social media, this kind of environment. I think you're seeing more and more of. And the idea of kind of moving more art and short film content into this format that's typically been used for social media is something we're kind of checking out right now to see how viable it is.
Now, if I look around here, I see, let's say, just a story of the moment, let's say, from the streets. Could be an interpretation of a documentation story, maybe.
This show is called Tbilisi 23. It's by Roberto Vitali, who's a Berlin-based Italian artist, and it's his first solo show. He was in Tbilisi around the time of the recent protests a few months ago. He just sort of happened to be there, and he's kind of a street photographer, action photographer. And these were just some shots that he got while he was there. He wound up publishing a small book, and it pretty much sold out. And these are images from the book. Berlin is a kind of a world crossroads, and different from New York in that it's more European, and there's more things kind of here even than in New York in a way, more different people. And in Berlin, you can learn empathy, but just from meeting people from different places. And to me, this show is kind of about understanding a little bit of the situation there, and having some sort of emotional and intellectual connection with the actual people going through.
I try to follow what's happening in Berlin, but it's so diverse. On one day I read an article about they want to build big office buildings in the Bielefeld airport, and then okay, they decided not to do it, but on the other day just another new building coming up. So it's very different from I think from the 19th and even the 20th. And not everyone is happy because the prices, of course, go very high and could be amazing high job to get a new rent because there's so much need. So what's happening in Berlin actually?
I first came to Berlin in 2007, and I bought an apartment in 2009. And my German friends said, "Why are you doing that?" And I'm like, what do you mean? And they're like, "Rent here is so inexpensive. Why would you buy a place?" I'm like, "Well, because it's so inexpensive." But then, this didn't happen only in Berlin. This is, it happened in New York and Vancouver, and property became a thing for international people to invest in. The value, and the more you buy, the more it goes up. So what was happening here, I think, is a combination of two things. There were people from everywhere coming to Berlin to invest in it, thinking it was a good deal. And then all the great press come to Berlin. "Oh, David Bowie was here, and then, U2 came here later, Lou Reed, blah, blah, blah." It just became kind of sexy, cheap, poor, but sexy. And so everyone came here. And then the second part of that is there's so much development, and there's pretty much no rules for the developers. And, we had a thing called Mietendeckel that just got repealed. It ended, I guess, a year and a half or 2 years ago. And it was like a rent cap. But there was no cap on the new stuff. So they could charge whatever they wanted. And some places are 30 or 40,000 per square meter. Which is funny because Tacheles, I think, is one of them, and that used to be the squat, in Oranienstrasse. In my opinion, it could have been handled better in some way, and maybe new developments should have some affordable housing included. It maybe should be part of the deal. But, a lot of people came and bought things here. And then also, this also happened in New York and in upstate New York. These towns just keep getting all this press saying how great they are, and then and it's not that great anymore. You're gonna become poor if, with rent in Berlin now. I mean, things used to be 500-600, now they're 1,500, and yeah. But Budapest changed like this. New York is the average rent went from $2,500 a month for like a one-bedroom place like 10 years ago to $4,500 now. So, and then you factor in inflation, and it's a crazy situation with real estate, I think.
This thing I wanted to ask you because you just mentioning, okay, you have some ideas in Budapest, in New York. So the fact that you are here in Berlin means that you think this is a very cool place to be and very nice, or it's just a story and it just happened somehow?
It's a little bit of a story now because during the virus I married a German gal, and so I'm just here more because she's here, and but we go to New York we're there about a quarter of the time in America. Also, my family is there. Probably if that hadn't happened, I don't know if there's a lot of good things about Berlin, but there's not a lot of, financial support in the art scene unless you're getting money from the government. And in that way, it's really good. But typically you really have to come through the German system to really understand all those funding mechanisms and possibilities. Look at the situation in New York, even with prices, it's kind of like, gosh. But New York, we're finishing 8.5 years of Lightyear. We've done 100 shows in 100 months, since 2015. So we'll see what happens going forward there. But in a way, I kind of had a good run there. And I think since COVID, the way people are doing things is sort of changing. I was thinking of this last night. If you think of life as like a river or something with rhythm, the rhythm's different, the flow's different than it was, even in 2018 or 2019, which, weren't totally easy, but it got even more pressurized somehow. And I think when you put this kind of the health issues and then that we had and some of the controversies, the pro versus con on the taking the vaccine. And then you add in the whole digital drug thing where, you know, you can get addicted to being mad at, you know, the person across from you. That confluence really has changed a lot of things. And then you throw inflation in there. A lot of things have just become more pressurized. And I think it's pretty much international.
The title of this series, this video interviews, is Paris Budapest Metro,
Yep.
and you have some Budapest connections. Maybe, and I know that you have some friends there, artists.
Oh yeah, I mean, the first person from Budapest I met was Esther Zvabo, the video artist, when she was working at Video Space with Zolt Kazma. I met her through Zolt. And then we did a show back in Berlin in probably 2009 or 10 for Esther called Haunted. That was a really cool show. And then Zolt and I moved on to the Decelerator with also an Australian curator named Adam Nankervis. And we opened that in Budapest, Berlin, and New York at the same time. And that was pretty cool. Actually, Berlin, Budapest, and Brooklyn, so a lot of bees. And then not long after, I met Tomasz Vezi, who now runs Radiator Gallery and some other stuff in New York. And through him, I met the Glowing Bulbs guys. And Tomasz from Glowing Bulbs is actually married to Esther, so it was just really a small world coming together. I was the curator on some mapping, super immersive stuff we did on the Brooklyn Bridge in 2011 and 2012. And then through that, Glowing Bulbs we got into doing some marketing stuff. We did Dom Perignon, they did the artwork, I did the curating and the writing and kind of was sort of the front man. And I will have to say that turned into kind of a difficult situation because the clients would insist that I was more involved in creating the work than I was. And that created some stress between the Glowing Bulbs guys and me, and it was really pretty rough. But we managed to eventually get it so in the contract they have to say Glowing Bulbs and Leo. And we moved on and did a ton of other bigger projects. We even did the Guggenheim Museum in New York for Tiffany and Company. Those guys mapped the whole thing. And lots of public art stuff. We did some stuff in Texas and other places. And then with the Hungarian connection, we also did Lightyear in New York with another guy named John Enser Parker, Farkas Falup from Glowing Bulbs. And I did a lot of shows with Kitzinger Gabor, who was working in touch designer mostly at the time. I think he's doing some other stuff now. And yeah, I mean, the Hungarian stuff is really, since I started doing larger and digital and video stuff, the Hungarian influence has been really in there.
Now let's go back to this gallery because you was in with a different name in different part of the city.
Yep. Well, I was involved in a space called Sur la Montagne, which I wasn't a partner in. I just did many shows there, and I knew the German crew that ran it. And that's where I did the show with Esther. And then myself, along with about 8 other people, we took over and turned it into Fatima Morgana. And I think I stuck around with that for 4 or 5 years. And then this space was just doing sporadic programming. We were doing some painting shows and some sculpture shows, but it didn't really, we just called it Sensei Studios then. And then during the virus, a Canadian gallery was programming here called The Dre, and they're based near Toronto, and that program is still going over there. But then we decided the space it's an interesting space, you can see. It was a kanipa or like a cafe. We realized in this space that because of sort of the way it looks and the floor, And where it is, it's better for photos, and we'll have video programs here. We'll have a 2-channel set up in the back and up front. And there's maybe some short film stuff that's going to come through here in the wintertime.
And then now I ask for practical advice.
Okay.
If I'm an artist and I want to approach a gallery, how should I do that?
It's always okay to email. I mean, the thing not to do is to come to an opening and then use that as your opportunity to try to get yourself a show. I always think that's pretty rotten. And never pull out your phone and start going like this. That drives people crazy. But it's okay to come to openings and meet and talk, and really, if you can, make a quality connection with the curator or anybody running a gallery, that's probably the best way to go. And then, send them an email and they check out your stuff. But to pressurize any situation, whether it's in a gallery or if you're dating or if you're with your family, to put pressure on people to do things, I think is the wrong way to go about it. But just to kind of, show up and and also be supportive of the other, of the shows that are there and the artists that are there. And I would also say, maybe if you want people to consider buying your work, maybe occasionally buy the work of others or trade with other artists. When a creator is only interested in themselves and they don't have any curiosity towards the creations of others, or the work of others, there's maybe a little bit too much of that.
Yeah, I also have a collection. It's mostly coming by exchanges that I bought something 10 years ago, but it was nice, but after 5 years I said that I don't like it anymore.
Yeah, and if somebody likes that, yeah. I mean, I started collecting in college because I realized I didn't want to hang up all these posters. I'm like, why hang up a poster? I was in theater a lot and also playing music and working at the television station on campus. So I knew all the art people were in the same building.
So as a visitor, sometimes when I try to go to a brand new city where I've never been before, I try to see what are the most interesting galleries, where to go, what to discover. And usually I find some difficulties to find there are so many galleries, but I don't see often that I can decide very quickly if this is interesting for me or not. Maybe you have some advice to how to look into the Berlin art view.
For Berlin, or
yeah, for Berlin, because or maybe anywhere, because if you have 2,000 galleries,
yeah,
you don't go visit. Or
I think with anywhere, and this is kind of my experience with Budapest and Berlin, it starts with making some friends or asking your colleagues from other places who have friends, and then meeting people there. Like when I first went to Budapest, I wound up talking to Marianne Saki, who was connected to Cosmozolt at the time, and she just generously took me on this amazing tour and told me the history by the castle, and we went everywhere and kind of told me a little bit of her personal history. I felt this connection, and then when I met people, then I also was able to ask them deeper questions, and then they would trust me more to take me to different places. So I think it's really through friends and connections. When I first came to Berlin, I remember I put a thing on Craigslist when you could do that still, and I'm like, I am looking for people who can show me around Berlin. And I met some people who introduced me to really good galleries. And so I think the people connection's the thing. In Berlin in particular, though, there's Berlin Art Link is a publication. There's a lot of arts publications here, I think. The other thing about Berlin that's really interesting, though, is there's so many small galleries popping up all the time and going out of business, the new ones. Another good way to do Berlin is just go to Auguststrasse and Linienstrasse, go walk around over there, go to Potsdamer Strasse, just check out those areas. But then you do miss smaller places like, you know, what's going on here in Weissensee, you know, Sechsauer Gallery's here, we're here, the Kunsthochschule is just over here when they have their Rundgang. Also too, this is a really good thing to do. The Kunsthochschule Weissensee and Utica have their Rundgang, which is like open studios twice a year, and there's one coming up here in July, I think in about a week and a half. And that is a great way to go see stuff, and it's really fun, and you're catching the, you know, the artists who are just coming out of school, and there's a lot of energy at those events, and those are worth seeking out.
Right, thank you very much.
All right, nice to meet you. Thank you for coming to Levels Gallery.